Ever had a Karen measure your grass? Paper slap. The clipboard hit the porch rail as she shouted about non-compliant vegetation. My aunt just kept watering the roses still. Then the phone beeped and I heard her call 911, twisting yard work into threat. The HOA logo glared like a badge in daylight. Radio. Click. That's when Aunt Linda placed her permit and badge on the table, sunlight flicking off the seal, and said, "Let's keep this on record." Next week, the clubhouse went silent and the bylaws got rewritten. Beep. The sound came from somewhere behind the hedge, a dispatcher's tone crisp as glass. A voice followed female caller reports disturbance. I stood by Aunt Linda's rosebed hose, still running, the scent of wet soil rising like steam. The morning air in Cedar Trace, Colorado had that November chill that makes the flag snap once and hang. Then I saw her Karen Gibbons, the HOA president, marching up the walk with a clipboard raised like a warrant. "You've ignored 3 notices," she barked. "Those shrubs are non-compliant." Section Order 1207. Aunt Linda, calm in her denim jacket, turned off the hose. "Good morning, Karen. Would you please cite the measurement variance on that?" Karen's jaw flexed. "I'm documenting a continuing violation." She shifted her phone to video. The door chime from our porch dinged faintly in the background, marking her rhythm. I stepped closer. "You want me to trim 2 inches, or just surrender the hedge entirely?" Her eyes flicked to her screen. The phrases came pre-packaged: ongoing threat, hostile resident. She'd said them before. You could hear the muscle memory. Karen Aunt Linda said evenly, "If you think there's a breach issue, a written citation." Instead, Karen punched the keypad on her phone. 911. I heard the beep again, colder this time. "This is Gibbons from Cedar Trace HOA, she said into the mic. "We have a trespass situation escalating at 104 Birch. My stomach tightened. I glanced at Aunt Linda, her face unreadable, steady as a notary seal. I pulled my phone, opened the timer, and hit record. Time, 03:17. I muttered just loud enough for the audio. When the patrol cruiser rolled in, tires whispering on asphalt, Karen straightened. The officer stepped out, hand on his belt, but posture relaxed. "Morning," he said. "Call came about a trespass." Karen moved fast. "Yes, officer. She's obstructing HOA enforcement." The man looked at Aunt Linda, then at me. "Ma'am, do you live here?" 22 years, she said. "I pay dues and prune roses. That's my crime." The officer blinked once, exhaled. "All right. Sounds like this is a civil matter." Karen's color drained. "She's refusing compliance." He tilted his head. "Ma'am, HOA disputes aren't police business. You can file code notice through proper channels." For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the flag rope tapping against the pole. Aunt Linda turned to Karen. "Then please attach the dispatch record to my file." Karen's mouth opened, froze mid-word. Clipboard trembling slightly. The officer gave a small nod, walked back to his car, and the cruiser's radio crackled a final click before fading down the street. I looked at Karen. "You'll need the call code for your report," I said. "Want me to text it?" She didn't answer. Just scribbled something that didn't look like words. Aunt Linda took the hose again, resumed watering as if the scene had been theater that finally hit intermission. A few neighbors peeked through blinds. Someone's grill smoked 3 houses down, that sweet charcoal smell drifting through the air. Life kept moving, pretending not to notice. Karen lowered her clipboard slowly, the way people do when they realize the performance isn't landing. "This isn't over," she said. "No," Aunt Linda replied. "It's on record now." She turned toward the house. The door chime pinged once more. I caught the faint reflection of the flag in her storm door glass, half-mast wavering in the wind like a held-in breath. Inside, she set her coffee mug beside a stack of HOA letters, each stamped "Final Notice." I glanced at them, then at the phone screen still recording. "Evidence," she said simply. Karen lingered by the gate, unsure whether to retreat or declare another rule. Finally, she walked away, muttering into her phone. The yard felt suddenly larger, like the air itself had taken our side. "Some people," Aunt Linda said, reaching for a towel dial power instead of reason. I shut off the hose water dripping from the brass nozzle like punctuation at the end of a witness statement. The recording clicked alive and Karen's voice snapped through a small speaker. Send a unit, hostile, resident. Dispatch, Supervisor Ray Cruz didn't flinch. He pressed rewind, listened again, eyebrows tightening as if the words themselves were off spec. The fluorescent lights hummed over our shoulders, steady as a metronome. Play from your time mark, he said. I glanced at my notes. 03:17. That's when she switches phrasing. Ray toggled the jog wheel with 2 fingers, a well-practiced move. Copy, let's hear the break, and the audio rolled the wind on our street, the half-mast flag rope ticking the pole, then Karen's clipped syllables. When the call reached 03:17, the tone changed. Her breath pulled in and she reclassified the situation in one polished sentence. She changes call type there, Ray said, neutral voice trained to be gravity, from noise complaint to trespass disturbance. That's not the same lane. Aunt Linda stood beside me, hands folded around a pen instead of a coffee mug. Can I request a full transcript of the call and CAD notes, she asked. You can, Ray said. You'll need to file a FOIA request with records. We keep audio incident type unit notes, times, and any reclassifications. Aunt Linda nodded. She set a form on the counter and signed. Her notary stamp came down with a clean press, Linda Carter S. Colby. Ray blinked. Scobie. Huh. His tone stayed courteous, but I caught the recalibration in his eyes. Across the room, a printer started, then stopped, half a page peeking out like a held breath. A records clerk in a cardigan waved us over. We'll attach the audio reference and CAD history if you initial here, she said, tapping a line on the form. Ray leaned closer to the console. People misuse call codes. Sometimes, he said, keeping his voice away from the microphone. They stretch emergency to control a situation that isn't one. Aunt Linda answered softly. That's why the record matters. The clerk slid a metal stamp across the counter. Aunt positioned the request under it and brought the stamp down. Received 03:17. The ink bled slightly into the paper fibers, permanent as a verdict. Ray rewound one more time. Listen to the gap before she reclassifies, he said. You hear a second voice. I listened. The speaker hissed the faint click of our door chime and then Karen again. If there was another voice, it was swallowed by wind and distance. Could be background, Ray said. Could be coaching. We don't assume. Aunt Linda didn't smile. We document. He glanced at the Pieter 1207 sheet Karen had waved at us earlier, now folded in my pocket like a bad fortune. What's that citation? He asked. HOA hedge height, I said. 2 inches, maybe 3 if you tilt the ruler. Ray typed something into Kiad. Logging a variance note, he said. This helps when the incident type doesn't match the described behavior. Doesn't decide anything by itself, but it keeps the trail straight. Behind us, the printer started again, steadier this time. The clerk stacked forms into a neat pile, then fed a manila folder with a practiced slide. When she returned, she placed it on the counter between us like a neutral zone. Your FOIA clock starts today, she said. You'll get the audio and dispatch notes. Redactions, if any, will be minimal names, addresses, that sort of thing. Ray added, and the reclassification will show in the call history. That's a field we can't edit on the fly. Aunt Linda initialed where the clerk pointed. Her pen never hesitated. I couldn't help it. How often does this happen? I asked Ray. A reclass in the middle like that? He shrugged one shoulder. Often enough to have a policy about it. The bar for hostile is higher than a hedge. Aunt Linda's eyes met his. That's why we keep the definition public. He studied her for a quiet beat, as if measuring whether this conversation would grow legs. You're familiar with procedure, he said. Enough to stay inside the lines, she answered. The clerk slid the folder toward Aunt. This is your copy, she said, then moved a small tin closer, a communal treat on slow mornings. Inside sat a single slice of diner pie in a waxy triangle bag, the kind a deputy drops off after night shift. Sugar helps with paperwork, she said. trust me. On our way out, I noticed the post office receipt stapled to a stack near the clerk's elbow, proof that this place still lived by clocks and seals. Ray walked us to the door. "When you get the transcript, check the cross stamps," he said. "Time on the call, time on the KIAD, and time on the FOI. The math tells a story." Aunt Linda nodded. "We'll read it in order." "Good," he said. "Just remember the goal is accuracy. We don't do gotcha here. We do record." Outside, the air was clearer than when we'd walked in the sky a hard winter blue. Aunt set the manila folder on the hood so she could steady the corner against the breeze. The ink of received 0317 looked even darker in the daylight. "What's the plan?" I asked. "Chain of custody," she said. Then a correction to HOA minutes. "No heat, just light. We drove home with the heater grumbling and the pie wedged between the seats like a citizen witness. At Aunt's kitchen table, we opened the folder and laid the forms in a straight line request acknowledgement contact sheet, case number. She handled paper the way a carpenter handles a square, slow enough to be exact, fast enough to stay on time. "Ray's good," I said. "He respects the record," she replied. I set the Otter 12-07 printout next to the FOIA acknowledgement. "If Karen cites hostile, what does she get out of that?" Speed Aunt said, flipping a page. "A faster response gives the appearance of authority. Perception becomes leverage." Leverage for what? Compliance by embarrassment. If a patrol car shows up, most people fold. I thought of the neighbor's blinds the way the street went quiet when the cruiser idled. "Not today. Not with the right lane," she said. "Civil lane, not criminal." The kitchen clock clicked 4 slow seconds. She placed a sticky note on the top form Exhibit A 911 transcript request. Then she wrote beneath it, "Attach CAD change log. Include 4.1207 variance note." I looked at the stamp again. Received 0317, a tiny thing that made the whole morning sit level. Aunt capped her pen. "Tomorrow, we request the audio officially from records," she said. Then the minutes. "You're going to confront Karen at the board." "We'll correct the record," she said, tone sanded smooth. "No theater." I leaned back chair, creaking. "You know that line Ray used about stretching emergency to control neighbors that's going to live rent-free in my head?" Aunt finally smiled. "You might like another one better. Try me." She tapped the FOIA header with her pen, then looked up at me. "Power hides in procedure until someone reads it aloud." I whistled under my breath. "That's a keeper." She affixed a small, discreet seal to the corner of the request. The emboss left a clean ring in the paper. The kitchen light buzzed once and settled. Somewhere outside, a delivery truck thumped the curb and rolled on. I nodded toward the notary stamp on the table. The gold letters caught the last of the afternoon sun. "Linda Carter-esque. Since when are you esky?" She didn't look up as she aligned the pages. "Since I learned silence wins hearings." The room went quiet enough to hear the heater's low click before it cycled off. The projector started with a low hum, a cone of dust hanging between the lens and a stapled screen. Folding chairs scraped. Someone parked a stroller by the bulletin board, which was layered with expired flyers, a BBQ sign-up, and diner coupons for Tuesday meatloaf. Karen Gibbons stood at the lectern with her usual poise. "We'll begin with the minutes from last week's compliance activity," she said, tapping a stack. "Item 1. Residents involved in aggressive confrontation at 104 Birch." Murmurs pricked the room. Aunt Linda, seated beside me, slid a small USB from her folder. In black marker, she'd written, "Evidence A." Karen cleared her throat. Per 1207. The hedge in question exceeded the allowable height and obstructed sight lines. The resident correction aunt said voice even. There was no measurement taken on site. "Please read the recorded variance method." Karen smiled without warmth. "We're not at Q&A yet." "Then read the line," Aunt said. A ripple moved through the rows. The board secretary glanced up, then down, then up again. I stood. "Let's anchor this to time. What timestamp are those minutes referencing Karen didn't look at me? The minutes reflect the board's understanding of events. Time, please, I said. A number. The secretary shuffled papers. Entry shows 0317. As a note on call type. The projector flashed a slide incident summary. The date in the corner looked wrong by a full day. I felt the room lean, and raised a single sheet. Madam President, this is Exhibit A FOIA Acknowledgement and Dispatch Receipt stamped. Received 0317. Please read it into the record. Karen gestured to the coffee table. If you'll leave your documents with the secretary, we'll— No, Aunt said gently. We'll place them on the overhead. I stepped to the cart, slotted the USB. The projector threw up a clean PDF Ray's cover memo, the key to reference the FOIA clock. The coffee urn hissed in the corner like a restless witness. Karen lifted her chin. Minutes are a narrative, not a transcript. They're a record, Aunt replied. If they contradict the source, they're not minutes. They're fiction. A resident 2 rows back whispered, "Did she say fiction?" I pointed to the header. Right here, call type changed midstream from noise to trespass. Those words are on tape. The secretary adjusted her glasses. Our draft says hostile resident. Aunt turned a page. That's not a police category. That's an adjective. A scatter of half-laughs, the kind that sounds like a room remembering its spine. Karen tapped the lectern. We're drifting from the agenda. Then docket to the agenda, I said. Minutes are wrong on date and on classification. Aunt slid another sheet onto the projector. The paragraph 1207 passage appeared redlined where the hedge definition used to be broad and was now surgically tight. Please note the revision date, she said. It's different from the date on the minutes. The projector's fan kicked up. The slide made the room glow a little colder. Karen spoke in that polished cadence I'd heard on the phone. Enforcement relies on board discretion. We record patterns to protect the community. Aunt looked at the audience, not Karen. Patterns are exactly the problem when they're written after the fact. From my jacket pocket, my phone buzzed once. Ray on text. Projector date off. Ask for source file hash. I raised a hand. Madam President, could we see the source file hash or export info for those minutes? It'll confirm when this was compiled. The secretary swallowed. I don't have that. Of course, Karen said quickly. We'll provide it after the meeting. Aunt placed a formal correction request on the lectern, the kind of document that asks for nothing but leaves no room to ignore. Please read this into the record. Karen didn't move. Or I can, Aunt offered, eyes calm. Line by line. The secretary reached for the paper fingers, a little shaky. She began to correct the minutes of date attach. Exhibit A 911 transcript request and CAD note, reflecting call type reclassification at year 317. Remove aggressive confrontation. Replace with civil HOA discussion. Stop, Karen said. A man near the door muttered, "Why stop?" The BBQ flyer fluttered when the vent kicked on. Aunt slid one more page under the lens. The projector filled with the minute's header date and a file path that shouldn't have been there, drafts minutes rewrite V2. Someone had exported without scrubbing the metadata. Gasps, audible and shared. The secretary stared at the screen like it had sworn at her. Karen tried a smile that didn't have an engine. Clerical tools can label in confusing ways. Hash and export info. I said not loud, not soft. We'll review, Karen said. Aunt leaned toward me, not taking her eyes off the room. This goes beyond bylaws, she whispered. It's misuse of record. Karen's smile faltered a breeze on a paper mask. The projector hummed. The room did math date mismatch wrong labels a call type that had moved like a shell game. For the first time since we'd entered, the board looked smaller than the bulletin board behind them. Aunt straightened. Madam President, please attach Exhibit A to the minutes and schedule a vote to adopt corrections. The secretary's pen hovered, then descended. Ink scratched. A small sound, but it carried. Karen held the smile another second. 2. Then she set down her gavel without using it. She doesn't raise her voice. A woman near the aisle breathed, "She raises evidence." The projector hummed on white square, waiting for the next page like a courtroom wall asking for truth in black letters. By dusk, the neighborhood had already decided what happened. They threatened the HOA, someone whispered at the curb, but the dispatch tape on Aunt's table said otherwise, its label neat as a court docket. On the porch, the wind smelled like cold pine and barbecue ash. The wind chime clicked in tidy intervals. The flagpole rope tapped the pole metal on metal, a steady metronome that never lied. Aunt Linda slid a sheet with a blue crest under a small brass paperweight shaped like a gavel. DOJ, letterhead, formal margins, language that didn't waste ink. Beside it, a post office slip with today's date and the manila envelope we'd carried back from dispatch. Across the street, porch lights flicked on one by one. Silhouettes moved behind screens, watching without watching. Rumors travel faster than records, I said. Records win, Aunt answered. If you let them speak. I nodded toward the letterhead. What are we doing with that filing the misuse complaint, she said. 911 is for emergencies. Stretching it to force compliance. She tapped the page. Can cross into civil rights territory when it targets a homeowner in a public way. The tool bench by the doorway cast a low amber glow. My lamp had a bulb that made steel look warm. Aunt opened a slim leather case just enough to show a dark glass rectangle. Not a weapon, a badge. I caught the crest only as a shape. She closed the case again, quiet, practiced. So, we're not bluffing. Never, she said. We're planning. What's the plan? Aunt took a second sheet of list in her handwriting, hearing body cam release, formal correction. 3 lines. No slogans. We request the body cam under state statute, she said. We ask the board to schedule a public hearing and attach Exhibit A to corrected minutes. We put the paper in daylight. And Karen. She can attend like any resident, Aunt said. She'll have the same time at the mic. From the sidewalk, the neighbor couple with the small terrier slowed. The dog's tags chimed like thin coins. Evening, the man called. Everything okay? Everything is recorded. Aunt said, pleasant, and gave a small wave. The couple moved on, curiosity trailing them like steam. I leaned on the railing. They're saying we embarrassed the board. Aunt set her pen down across the DOJ page perfectly parallel to the header. We corrected the minutes, she said. Embarrassment belongs to fiction, not record. The wind chime ticked twice. I watched her take the FOA acknowledgement and align it with the complaint corner's true edges flush. She did everything like a carpenter squares a cut slow enough to be exact, fast enough to stay on schedule. What about retaliation, I asked. That's why we write, she replied. People respect procedures even when they don't like outcomes. She looked past me toward the flag. Tomorrow morning, submit complaint and body cam request. Afternoon, email board counsel with hearing request. No heat, just sunlight. I smiled despite myself. You sound like you've done this. I have. I waited. She didn't fill the silence. The flag rope tapped 3 times like a judge's light gavel. Aunt, I said. Ray called you esque. You stamped like a notary, and you just used the phrase civil rights territory like you bill for it. I tilted my head at the leather case. What am I looking at? Her eyes stayed on the paperwork. Identity's not a flex, she said. It's a responsibility. The porch light hummed and steadied. A kid rode past on a scooter and kicked twice wheels clacking the sidewalk seam. Somewhere a garage door stuttered and stopped. The truth matters, I said, yes. And who says it matters also matters. She opened the leather badge case fully this time, no flourish, just fact. The seal caught a sliver of porch light. She held it there until I could read what was printed and burn it into memory. I exhaled. You're a... Yes, she said, closing it with a soft click that seemed to draw the whole street tighter. Federal Prosecutor. Criminal Division temporarily assigned to our district for overflow. The wind paused. The wind chime didn't. You were going to tell me when it changed the work, she said. Tonight, it changes the work. I looked at the docket numbers, the margins, the way her pen lay like it was part of the page. We go public. We go lawful, she corrected, hearing record correction. The board can save face by choosing accuracy, and if they don't, we'll still choose accuracy. A porch across the cul-de-sac clicked on. The terrier barked once, then thought better of it. The air had that quiet that only shows up when the neighborhood senses something bigger than gossip. Aunt slid the complaint into a blue folder, then stacked the HOA acknowledgement on top. She fastened the paperweight again, a small brass gavel on a square base. Its shadow squared the DOJ crest. "Linda," I said, "this is going to get loud." No. She watched the street like it was a jury box. "When you serve the law, you don't shout, you document." I nodded. The line felt true in my chest, like the way a level sits when the bubble finally centers. "How do you want me?" "Tomorrow," I asked. "Courier," she said. "Take the body cam request to PD, the complaint to DOJ field, and the hearing request to the board office. 3 receipts, 3 clocks ticking. And after that, we prepare exhibits," she said. "Dates, times, hash values. We don't speculate. We show." The flag rope tapped again 1-2. Aunt lifted the badge case, looked at it, then set it back down. The case closed itself, leather settling with a whisper. Porch lights blinked once more down the block. The house across from us went dark, then on again like a breath. She collected everything, squared the folder edges with the table, then stood. "We start at 8, she said. "Don't dress it up. Bring a pen that doesn't skip." And Karen Aunt picked up the blue folder and held it level in one hand. By Wednesday, she said, voice even, they'll learn who they called 911 on. The wind chime answered with a soft, bright chord. The projector gave a nervous whine as the image snapped into focus. Folding chairs creaked. The community center flag stirred in the AC draft. Aunt Linda stood at the mic, one finger on a printed agenda. "Play from 0317, she said. A tech in a polo shirt clicked the trackpad. Mic pop. The room tightened. Karen's voice filled the speakers clean as a stamp. Possible trespass, aggressive resident. I watched the front row board members stiffen their blazers, Karen's attorney with a capped pen and a face already calculating the minimum retreat. On the side table, the coffee urn hissed like it didn't want to be here either. The BBQ tables stacked by the wall held a sagging banner from some old fundraiser. "Pause," Aunt said. "Now sync the body cam to the dispatch audio, please." The screen split. Left pane are walkway roses shaking in the wind. Right pane. The CAD time bar rolling toward the mark. When the counter hit 0317, Karen's words repeated and the camera showed what the officers saw, a calm yard, a neighbor with a clipboard, a hose nozzle dripping like a metronome. The officer stepped to the aisle mic. "What I observed that morning was a civil HOA matter," he said. "No trespass, no criminal intent. We cleared without action." Karen's attorney rose. "The board receives complaints in good faith," he said, careful as a man carrying soup across a carpet. "Sometimes language." Aunt lifted a hand. "We'll let the record speak." She nodded to the tech. "Advance 10 seconds." The projector obliged. Karen's reclassification played again. The left pane body cam showed nothing changing except the flag rope tapping the pole and my mouth counting seconds for the audio. A ripple moved through the rows, residents murmuring, chairs shifting a low wave as if the room had finally realized it didn't have to keep holding its breath. Aunt looked at the board. "Madam President, please adopt the minutes correction and attach the body cam and dispatch exhibit to the permanent record." Karen's attorney tried for a foothold. "We dispute the characterization of false escalation. The President acted, according to policy, doesn't outrank truth," Aunt said. "We're not assigning motive, we're correcting record." He glanced down at his notes. The seconds were louder than the words. From the third row, a hand rose. "So, did she call the cops to win a hedge fight?" a man asked, voice flat, high school history teacher, cadence. "We're not weighing motives," Aunt repeated. "We're aligning minutes to media." The tech zoomed the left pane my watch face reflecting 0317. The officer's shoulder cam catching Karen's phone as she angled it away. The yard unchanged, same wind, same roses. "Resume." Aunt said. The audio rolled. Karen's phrasing tightened. Hostile resident. The officer spoke again. That term doesn't appear in our charge categories, he said. It's not a code we use to dispatch or clear. Karen's attorney leaned toward his mic. The president did not invent terms. She, counsel Aunt, said still even the CAD log shows the reclass. Your minutes show aggressive confrontation that didn't occur. The board must correct or knowingly carry a false narrative. Karen's eyes scanned the room looking for a friend. The room looked back like a mirror. Aunt set a document on the lectern. Motion to correct minutes remove, aggressive confrontation. Insert civil HOA discussion. Attach body cam and dispatch record as Exhibit B. Note, call type change at 0317. Add officer's statement. No crime. Cleared without action. Karen's attorney scribbled. He didn't argue. He couldn't. The mismatch was a nail flush to the wood. Vote, someone said from the back. The board whispered in a stack of stage whispers. Karen tapped the gavel once, but didn't use it. The secretary's pen hovered. Before the vote, Aunt said one more piece for clarity. She nodded to the tech. Show the minutes export info. A sidebar popped open the metadata nobody meant to show again. The room read the line in a single inhale as drafts, minutes, rewrite, V2, compiled, date/time. Karen's attorney looked down. He didn't look up. Aunt faced the rows. Facts don't shout, they replay. And when they replay minutes that don't match, must yield. Silence. The dignified kind. The kind that understands what it's witnessing. Karen said, "We'll take it under advisement." Aunt didn't blink. Adopt the correction. A board member cleared her throat. Move to adopt. Another second. All in favor, the secretary asked. Hands rose. Not all of them. Enough. Motion carries. The secretary said, voice thinner than it had been an hour ago. The projector went to a neutral blue, the whine finally settling into a hum. Aunt took one step forward to the center mic. Her eyes were steady, her posture quiet. The room held like a picture frame. For the record, she said, I am federal counsel. You could hear the HVAC pause. You could hear pens stop. The sentence landed without weight and somehow weighed everything. I appear here as a resident, she continued, not in my federal capacity. The board now has a corrected record and an accurate timeline. If any party uses emergency services to force compliance again, we will address it through the correct civil channels. No one moved for a beat. 2. The coffee urn ticked as it cooled. Somewhere near the door, a child whispered, "What happened?" and a parent said, they listened. Karen's attorney leaned toward his mic. We reserve. You have the record, Aunt said. That's the reserve. I looked at the faces, neighbors, the officer, the board, a community deciding whether it knew itself. The room wasn't hot. It was clear. Aunt gathered the exhibits, slid them into a folder, squared the edges. She gave a small nod to the officer, to the tech, to the secretary, whose hands still shook. On the way back to our row, she passed Karen without turning her head. The president stared straight ahead, learning in real time what it feels like when a narrative that used to obey you decides to obey the truth. A man near the aisle said it low, maybe to himself, maybe to the room. Finally, someone fought back, and nobody corrected him. The flag rope tapped against the glass door, steady, deliberate, as if counting down to something inevitable. Inside, the hearing room still smelled of coffee and paper. No one left after the vote. Even the air seemed to wait for the next sentence. On the table lay a manila envelope stamped neatly with $241. The label alone changed the temperature of the room. Aunt Linda lifted her badge case and opened it beneath the fluorescent light. The gold seal caught a flash from the overhead bulb, simple, undeniable. A hush. Someone's phone shuddered before they thought better of it. Karen stood behind the lectern, eyes wide, blinking too often. Her lawyer leaned close, whispering in short, nervous fragments. The board members' stiffened hands frozen over notes that suddenly looked obsolete. Aunt's tone was even. For clarity, I'm entering my formal role. I am federal counsel with the Department of Justice assigned to this district. I've appeared as a resident, but the pattern we've documented qualifies as misuse of emergency services. That violates both statute and public trust. The door opened again with a short creak. A man in a gray suit stepped in tall, composed. He showed ID to the secretary, then crossed the aisle with quiet confidence. "Agent Miller, DOJ," he said. "Here to observe." He set a federal brief blue cover embossed seal beside the A241 envelope. Its weight was small, but final. "We're not here to intervene," he said, voice calm. "We're here to witness compliance." Karen's lawyer stood. "This is a homeowner's meeting, not a federal proceeding." Miller looked at him mildly. "Then you'll appreciate that our role is merely to ensure accuracy. Truth is never out of jurisdiction." The gavel touched the table, once soft, uncertain. Karen's grip on it looked unfamiliar now. Aunt gestured toward the exhibits. "The board has corrected its minutes. The next step is procedural a policy banning use of emergency dispatch to enforce HOA covenants. Include a training requirement for all officers and a rule to attach media evidence when record disputes occur." Karen's lawyer tried to steady his voice. "My client acted in good faith. Inaccuracy, Aunt said, is not faith, it's risk." Miller opened the brief to a page tabbed in red. "Federal Review requests a written compliance plan within 7 days. We expect to see acknowledgement of false entries and the steps you'll take to prevent recurrence." 7 days, the lawyer repeated. "That's not feasible." "It is," Miller replied, "when the evidence is already public." Karen looked at Aunt. "You're accusing me of a crime," no Aunt said. "I'm reminding you of boundaries." The lawyer whispered something strategy, maybe prayer, but Karen's voice wavered. "We'll convene a special session next week." "Specify," Aunt said. 7 days, Karen admitted quietly. "We'll adopt the policy by then." Miller closed the brief. "Good. The statute we reference, HOA 241, covers conspiracy against rights. We're not invoking it today. We're noting the line that must never be crossed." A man near the back arms folded, muttered, "About time someone said that out loud." The sound wasn't loud, but it carried. The secretary scribbled the pen, scratching loud enough to seem like proof. Behind her, the bulletin board showed sun-faded diner coupons and a half-torn BBQ flyer ghosts from a smaller world. Aunt gathered the papers, stacking them neatly, her motions slow, deliberate. "Our goal is cooperation," she said. "No vendetta. Just the truth where it belongs on record." Karen's lawyer exhaled. "Counsel withdraws from this portion," he said quietly, closing his folder. The gavel fell once. Karen's voice cracked only slightly. "Special session in 7 days. Draft policy circulated 48 hours prior." Miller nodded. "That'll do. We'll attend Friday to read the findings into record." He paused, surveying the faces, neighbors, officials, the uneasy line between them. "You can run an HOA," he said, "but you can't outvote the law." The line landed like a stamp. No applause. Just stillness, the kind that understands it has witnessed a correction. Aunt looked over her shoulder at me. "Courier duty again tomorrow," she murmured. "File copies with DOJ and PD." "Same route?" I asked. "Same truth," she said. As we turned toward the exit, Karen remained by the lectern gavel, resting uselessly in her hand. The flag rope outside struck the pole again, steady, metallic, exact. Agent Miller closed his case, nodded once to the board, and followed us out. "Findings will be read Friday," he said over his shoulder. Karen didn't answer. Her expression was blank as fresh paper waiting for ink. The door shut behind us. The rope tapped one last time, 1, 2, 3, and the sound felt like closure. The recording light blinked red, tiny, and patient on the front of the podium. Every time Agent Miller finished a sentence, there was a pause, silence shaped like punctuation. "Finding 1, he read, voice low but resonant. "Misuse of 911 emergency protocols for the purpose of enforcing non-criminal homeowner covenants." No reaction at first, only the hum of the ceiling fans and the click of a chair leg shifting against the tile. Finding 2, Miller continued, turning the page. Selective enforcement of HOA bylaws in violation of equal treatment provisions. Someone coughed near the back where the post office tubs of printed bylaws waited for recycling. Karen's seat was empty, only the brass nameplate left half-tilted. In her place sat a soft-spoken man with a binder labeled Reform, edges already fingerprinted by nervous hands. I sat beside Aunt Linda, who held the DOJ findings letter flat on the table, the embossed seal catching the light. She looked more like an accountant than a prosecutor, calm, measured, unarmed, except with clarity. Ray, the dispatch supervisor, stood near the side wall. He wasn't in uniform, but the lanyard badge around his neck made him look official enough to make people stand straighter. Finding 3 Miller said failure to provide procedural transparency to residents during board actions resulting in suppression of resident rights. He looked up. These are not accusations. They are corrections. The new interim chair nodded slowly, voice tight but sincere. We accept all findings. The board will comply with the department's recommendations. Aunt Linda leaned toward her mic. For the record, she said no civil penalties will be pursued provided full compliance and public acknowledgement within 30 days. A ripple of relief crossed the room. The residents who had been whispering through months of meetings finally exhaled together. Ray smiled faintly. Dispatch has already revised our training. Non-compliant vegetation is no longer a trigger phrase, he said, earning a few dry laughs. The BBQ pit outside still smoked from an earlier lunch. Its smell drifted through the half-open doors, a reminder that this was still a neighborhood, not a courtroom. Miller folded his papers neatly and said, Justice doesn't end with findings. It begins with maintenance. He looked at Aunt Linda. Counsel, would you like to add a closing statement? Aunt stood hands folded loosely on the folder. This isn't vengeance, she said. It's maintenance. We fix what was warped not to punish but to keep the rest from bending. A long silence. Then applause, restrained but steady like the first rain after a fire. The interim chair raised his gavel, all in favor of adopting the reform package as red hands lifted across the room. Every one of them counted out loud, aye. The vote passed unanimous. Miller nodded once, satisfied. He pressed the stop button on the recorder. The red light blinked twice, then went dark. I glanced toward the bulletin board by the exit. Someone had already pinned a fresh notice printed in large, bold font, Procedures Protect People. It hung crooked, but nobody fixed it. Maybe crooked things deserved to stay visible for a while as reminders. Aunt gathered her folders, checked the envelope seal, and smiled at me. You can return the files now, she said. We're done here. As we stepped outside, the evening wind moved through the flag ropes again, this time softer, almost forgiving. A neighbor near the door whispered just loud enough for both of us to hear. Finally, someone fought back lawfully. The words settled over the parking lot like a quiet verdict. A week later, the bulletin board outside the clubhouse looked different. 3 new rules were pinned side by side, laminated, signed, and dated. 1. No emergency calls for civil matters. 2. All minutes verified against media within 7 days. 3. Procedures protect people. The radio tone pinged once from someone's car, then faded into quiet. The storm had passed not with thunder, but with paperwork and patience. Kids raced under the flagpole, their laughter cutting across the cool evening air. The BBQ smoke hung like a gray ribbon over the cul-de-sac. For the first time in months, nobody spoke in whispers. I stood near the curb with Ray, who was balancing a styrofoam plate of ribs and still wearing his dispatch lanyard. Never thought this place would make the news for good reasons, he said. Newsworthy isn't always bad, I answered. Sometimes it's just proof the system still works when someone bothers to use it. He nodded, squinting toward the flag half lit by the lowering sun. Feels like the air changed. It did, I said, because the record did. At the long folding table, Aunt Linda stood near the new policy sheet. Residents lined up with pens signing under the words, Procedures Protect People. Her badge was gone tonight. She was just Linda, again. Neighbor, gardener, quiet woman who'd turned a small injustice into a civic correction. "Did you ever think it'd end like this?" I asked her when she walked over. "I never think about endings," she said. "Just maintenance." Behind her, the post office van rolled by with its lights off, coasting through the last delivery of the day. Someone turned up a small radio on the picnic table country station, fading between static and melody. The grill hissed, fat, hitting coals. The smell of hickory and sauce hung between us. Every conversation sounded normal again. Weather taxes, grandkids. But every voice carried a little more confidence in how things could be set right. I thanked Ray quietly. "If you hadn't pulled that 911 log, we'd still be guessing." He waved it off. "You'd have found it anyway. You and your aunt, different kind of persistence. She's the one who taught me that a document can outlast a rumor." He smiled. "Good lesson. Keeps the lights on." Across the street, kids drew chalk lines in the driveway, turning their names into bright borders. Aunt Linda watched them for a moment, then started packing up trays and plates, her movements slow, satisfied. "Heading out already?" I asked. She nodded. "It's done. Let them own the quiet." The flag rope clinked once against the pole just as it had at the start of everything. Only now, it didn't sound like tension, it sounded like rhythm. As the sun dropped, I looked again at the bulletin board. The new sheet fluttered slightly in the breeze. The ink bold, the meaning clear. A neighbor behind me murmured, almost to himself, "We should have done this years ago." "Yeah," I said, "but now it's on paper." The radio tone blipped once more from a cruiser turning the corner, then faded out entirely. Aunt's voice came back to me from earlier in the week, steady as a rulebook line. "Justice doesn't echo, it settles." And tonight, under the flag and the smell of barbecue, it finally had. The sun caught the posted order on the bulletin board, its seal pressed flat against new tape. Kids ran under the flagpole, laughter mixing with the faint hiss of a grill. I traced the edge of the findings letter now framed beside the gate and felt the weight lift, proof that paper done right can outlast anger. Aunt Linda waved once before heading home, leaving the crowd to its calm. The neighborhood didn't need speeches. The rules themselves had become the ceremony. Justice had settled quiet but firm. Finally, someone fought back. Justice isn't loud, it's steady. Share your HOA story below your map might help someone redraw theirs.